I met Lisa at a friend's wedding in Boston, one of those early summer events where everything smells like roses, champagne, and heat off the pavement. I wasn't in the mood to go that night. I had flown in from New York after a brutal stretch at the office, and all I wanted was a quiet dinner, a hotel bed, and no small talk. But I owed my college buddy, and he'd asked me personally to come. So I showed up, tried to fake interest in whatever conversations floated past, and that's when I saw her. She was standing near the bar, laughing with a group of people I didn't recognize, a glass of white wine in one hand, the other lazily twisting a napkin. She had this open, easy energy, not loud, not attention-seeking, just comfortable. Like she was exactly where she wanted to be. I watched her for longer than I probably should have before finally walking over. We hit it off fast. Turns out she wasn't part of the wedding party at all, just a +1 to one of the bridesmaids. A freelance illustrator with a sharp wit and a slightly dark sense of humor, she didn't care about corporate job titles or networking. That alone made me like her more than half the people I'd been surrounded by lately. We talked the rest of the night. After the wedding, we kept in touch. Phone calls turned into weekend visits, and within 6 months, she moved into my apartment in Midtown. Our lives blended quickly. She kept her own schedule, worked from home, picked up gigs through agencies and publishing contacts while I disappeared into conference calls and balance sheets. I liked coming home to her. The apartment felt warmer with her in it, like someone had finally painted over the gray. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony upstate. Nothing flashy. Just us, close friends, a few family members, and a lot of wine. We didn't need more than that. Our lives were already full. Lisa made our home feel like a real place to land, art on the walls, music in the evenings, dinners that didn't feel rushed. She never pushed back against the long hours I worked. She knew what my job demanded, especially after I got promoted to senior financial manager at the firm. She liked that I was ambitious, and I appreciated that she never made me feel guilty for it. Our routine worked. Mornings were quiet, coffee, emails, maybe a shared bagel if we had time. She'd work on her projects while I headed out. Evenings were calmer, dinners together more often than not, a show, sometimes just sitting side by side reading, barely talking, and somehow still connected. We traveled when we could, a week in Lisbon, a long weekend in Santa Barbara, a snowy Christmas in Vermont. She made those trips easy, packed light, smiled at everything, never complained when plans shifted. I started to think we had figured out something other couples hadn't. No tension, no games. Just steady partnership. If anyone asked, I would have told them, yeah, we're good. We're better than good. We had our thing. It worked. And it wasn't about luck. It was built. I always liked Sundays with Lisa. They had their own pace, quiet mornings, no alarms, the dog stretching across our feet at the edge of the bed, the smell of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen before either of us had to say a word. She usually played some low instrumental music while she cooked, the kind with just enough rhythm to keep the room alive without demanding attention. It was the kind of rhythm we both grew to depend on. We didn't host many parties, but we kept our social circle tight. Dinner with 2 or 3 friends, usually at our place. Lisa liked trying new recipes, the weirder, the better. She once made roasted fennel and pear pizza that sounded completely wrong, but somehow worked. Everyone raved about it. That was her way, subtle, unexpected, and surprisingly effective. She didn't try too hard to impress anyone. She just quietly did it. I appreciated how independent she was. A lot of people I worked with had spouses who lived on their schedule, followed them to events, kept dinner ready, built their day around the calendar of a corporate machine. Lisa didn't. She carved her own space. She kept regular freelance contracts with a few design houses and publishers, and her name had even started showing up in magazine credits. She had meetings over coffee in cozy downtown spots while I sat in glass-walled conference rooms with suits from Zurich and Singapore. 2 different worlds, but they never clashed. Somehow, we made them fit. Work, for me, had become what most people think success looks like: long hours, firm handshakes, bonuses that made the weekends feel earned. I was climbing the structure. Strategy accounts, long-term forecasting, internal audits, the kind of work that keeps your name in the right rooms, even if no one outside those rooms has any idea what you do. Lisa never asked for much out of my job. She didn't need me to explain balance sheets or equity projections. What she wanted was simple: presence. Even if it was brief. A genuine answer when she asked, "How was your day?" A few minutes on the couch at night before I drifted off mid-show. And when I gave her that, it was like handing over something much bigger than time. We kept our travel light that year: 2 small trips and a week in Maine at a rental house with a view of the water. Lisa painted in the mornings while I caught up on reports in a chair by the window. We'd meet in the afternoons for a walk into town, grab lunch, talk about nothing important. One evening we found an old bookstore on a side street and ended up spending over an hour sitting on the floor in the back, flipping through dusty biographies and weird photography books. We didn't buy much. We didn't need to. The quiet was enough. She always made that part easy. It's strange, how much you get used to something working. Not because it's effortless, but because both people show up and keep showing up. That was us. No drama, no ultimatums, no missed birthdays or thrown wine glasses. Just 2 people with their own lives, choosing to share them under the same roof. At the time, I thought that was rare. And I valued it like it was. Lisa was always better than me at remembering the small things: birthdays, anniversaries of people we barely saw, the type of wine someone liked, or which neighbor's kid had a peanut allergy. I used to joke that her brain was part Rolodex, part weather radar. She'd just smile and pretend to write it all down in some secret notebook I'd never find. She never needed the credit. She just liked making people feel thought of. She kept our apartment feeling like a home. Not in any traditional, homemaker, way. It wasn't about fresh flowers on the table or a perfectly staged bookshelf. It was more in the way she adjusted the lighting in the evenings, or how the couch always had the right number of blankets, or how the kitchen always had enough food for guests who might show up with no warning. She made a place feel lived in, not arranged. Work kept me busy, but even at my most exhausted, I knew I could count on her to carry the calm when I couldn't. When I had long days, back-to-back meetings, endless spreadsheets, a tough client, she didn't ask for the highlight reel. She waited until I wanted to talk. And when I did, she listened like someone who wasn't waiting for their turn to speak. We spent weekends doing small things: errands, movies, trying out new restaurants. Sometimes we'd take the subway to the end of the line just to walk around a neighborhood we'd never visited. She liked to explore without a plan. I liked structure, but I learned to let go of that with her. With Lisa, you didn't need an agenda for the day to feel complete. My parents liked her immediately. My mother, who never gave compliments lightly, pulled me aside after our second dinner together and said, "She makes you more like yourself." My father nodded, and that was that. They welcomed her like she had always been part of the family. Lisa handled it all with her usual grace, never overly polite, never trying too hard. She just was who she was. It was enough. Her parents lived upstate, and we drive out there maybe once every few months. Quiet folks. Her dad was a retired teacher, her mom still did part-time work at the local library. They were warm in a reserved way, people who didn't talk too much but meant every word when they did. Lisa always relaxed around them. She laughed more freely, slowed down. I liked seeing that version of her, grounded, steady, content. Like nothing could shake her. We kept things balanced. She had her friends, I had mine, and we had our shared group in the middle. Dinners, birthdays, the occasional weekend out of town. She never made a fuss if I had late nights. I never pressed if she wanted time alone. It worked. Not because we didn't care, but because we trusted each other enough to let the other breathe. And that kind of ease? It's not something you find by accident. It's something you build. Brick by brick, week by week, until it holds up without needing to be tested. At that point, we'd been married 4 years. We had a rhythm. A life that didn't ask questions because it didn't have to. Everything had its place. And I wouldn't have changed a thing. That winter, we spent most evenings in the kind of quiet months that pass without anything huge happening, but somehow leave the warmest imprint. Work stayed demanding, end-of-year reconciliations and tax prep season always tightened the calendar, but the stress didn't follow me home the way it used to. Lisa was good at that. Keeping home separate. She made sure I didn't bring numbers to the dinner table, and I appreciated that more than I said out loud. She'd started taking more illustration work for a publishing house in Chicago. It wasn't permanent, just a 6-month stretch of children's book projects, mostly layout and character work. She loved it. Every few days she'd show me rough sketches, ask my opinion, then roll her eyes when I said something like, "He looks like a frog," about a drawing that was, in fact, a frog. It became a routine, her pretending I was helpful, me pretending I had taste. It was comfortable. It made me laugh. We still made time for each other. Thursdays were no work talk nights. We ordered takeout, watched something stupid, and ignored anything that felt like a deadline. Lisa would usually curl up with her legs tucked under her, glass of wine in hand, narrating whatever show we were watching in a sarcastic whisper. I'd tell her to stop, but I never actually wanted her to. It was just one of those things couples do, a rhythm you fall into that somehow makes the house feel more alive. She'd added some new art to the walls. Nothing expensive, prints from small artists she liked. One in the hallway outside the bedroom, another above the bookshelf in the living room. I noticed she was rearranging things more often, the couch pillows, the mantelpiece, even the kitchen shelf layout. Nothing dramatic, just small changes. I chalked it up to winter restlessness. Lisa always got a little more creative when stuck indoors. She also started going to more daytime meetups, fellow illustrators, she said, or creative workshops that popped up around the city. She'd come home with samples, flyers, little zines made by local artists. She had a way of making even the simplest things feel like discoveries. I never doubted where she'd been. It wasn't a question that needed asking. We were still making plans. A trip in the spring, Italy, if we could make the dates work. She'd found a small town in the north with old stone alleys and vineyards stretching into the hills. We talked about renting a car, driving from village to village with no map. She already had a folder of places she wanted to see. I told her I'd just follow along. That's what I remember most about that time, how much we were still thinking forward. No sign of slowdown. No hint that something might change. Just the steady movement of a couple who knew how to exist side by side without friction. Even when we argued, and we did, like anyone, it didn't stick. We worked through it, and that was that. Lisa still looked at me the same way she had since the beginning, or at least, I thought she did. We didn't second-guess each other. Didn't analyze every sentence or tone. It was trust, and it ran so deep I never felt the need to check if it was still there. That's what life was then, simple, structured, and exactly what I'd wanted it to be. And I thought we were just getting started. The first thing I noticed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a missing phone call or a weird story or some gut-punch moment of doubt. It was just, a glance. Or maybe the end of one. It happened on a Thursday, one of our no-work talk nights. I came home late, a little fried from a long review meeting with upper management. Lisa was already curled up on the couch, laptop open, a glass of wine untouched on the coffee table beside her. She looked up as I came in and smiled, but there was a half-second delay. Not hesitation. Just a flicker. Her face shifted from one expression to the next, like someone changing the channel mid-show. I didn't think much of it at first. Long day, probably. We didn't always sync perfectly, that was normal. I dropped my bag, changed out of my work clothes, and joined her. We spent the rest of the evening watching something we'd already seen twice, half joking our way through it like always. Whatever that look had been, it disappeared into the background noise. But the next day, I remembered it again. Not because something was wrong. Just because it had left a small mark in my mind, and I wasn't used to that. The following week, I had an off-site lunch with a client and came back to the office a little early. I stopped by Lisa's favorite bakery on the way and grabbed her a lemon tart she liked. When I got home to drop it off, she wasn't there. Again, nothing strange. She often went out during the day to work from cafes or meet her design contacts. I left the box on the counter with a note, surprise. Thought of you. When I got home that night, the note was still there, but the box had been opened and the tart half gone. She'd eaten it. She'd just never mentioned it. Not a crime. Not even unusual. But in the past, that kind of gesture, even something small, would have gotten a smile, maybe a quick text. That was our rhythm. Not because we needed to keep score, but because we didn't let little things float by unacknowledged. It was how we stayed connected in the middle of everything. I asked how her day had gone, and she gave me the usual answer: productive, a little boring, worked from that cafe on 11th, ran into someone from a book group she used to attend. She told me about a guy with a dog that tried to steal her muffin. We laughed. It all sounded normal. Still, I couldn't help wondering if she'd seen the note before or after she started eating. It sounds ridiculous now, even writing it out, the idea that a missed comment about dessert could mean anything. But I remember that moment clearly. Not because it raised any alarms, but because it didn't fit. Not with Lisa. That week, I noticed her working more at night. She said deadlines were piling up, and I didn't doubt it. She always pushed herself when she got deep into a project. But it started happening more often. Me downstairs watching TV, her upstairs in the office, door mostly closed. There was no reason to feel strange about any of it. But something shifted that week, not in her behavior, not exactly. In me. I didn't say anything. Didn't accuse, didn't ask. I didn't even know what to ask. It just felt like something was pulling slightly off center. And for the first time, I didn't know if it was temporary, or if I'd just never noticed it before. The following week, Lisa mentioned she was picking up a new contract, some magazine layout project from a startup out west. She said the art director found her portfolio online and reached out through her site. She seemed genuinely excited about it. It's fast-paced, kind of loose. They don't have much structure yet, she told me one morning, sipping her coffee, still wearing her robe. But they're fun. Young team. Very remote casual. I nodded, asked a few questions, and left for work like any other day. There wasn't anything about the exchange that seemed off. But a few days later, I noticed something strange while printing receipts from our shared email. Lisa had forwarded a batch of image files from one of her freelance addresses to our home printer. Nothing unusual. But the file names were just random. Not client project titles, not book names. Just letter number strings, like placeholders. When I opened one, expecting maybe a character sketch or layout, it was blank. A completely white image. Another showed nothing but gray blur, like static. She must have sent the wrong versions, I figured. Test files. A glitch. But then why print them? I didn't mention it. It didn't feel like something worth making a fuss over. She worked across 3 or 4 devices, often at once. Mistakes happened. But I remembered it. And that's what made it different. Before, I wouldn't have. But now, I was starting to pay closer attention, even when I didn't understand what I was seeing. Around that same time, she started dressing differently during the day. Nothing dramatic. Just more polished than usual for someone working from home. Tighter sweaters. Earrings I hadn't seen in a while. A little makeup, even when she swore she was staying in. I teased her gently once, asking if she was trying to impress the Zoom call crowd. She laughed and said, "Hard to stay in pajamas when you're dealing with new clients. I need to feel like I'm in work mode." It made sense. But it wasn't how she used to operate. She began stepping out mid-afternoon more often too, for coffee, for fresh air, for last-minute errands. She'd come back smiling, chatting about something she overheard on the street or a weird dog she saw. I listened, responded, tried to stay grounded in our routine. But the rhythm was changing, and I felt it. The oddest moment came one evening when I came home earlier than usual. A last-minute cancellation freed up my afternoon. I walked in, keys in hand, and heard faint music from upstairs. Her office door was slightly ajar. She was on a call, headphones in, laughing at something, speaking quickly in a voice I didn't quite recognize, a tone just a shade more playful, a little more intimate. I didn't interrupt. I dropped my bag quietly and waited in the living room. She came down 10 minutes later and smiled when she saw me. "You're home early." "Yeah," I said. "Client bailed. Thought I'd sneak out." She nodded, kissed me on the cheek, and started unloading the dishwasher like nothing had happened. It wasn't suspicious. It wasn't proof of anything. But it didn't feel like nothing. There's a kind of unease that builds without sound, not because someone's doing something wrong, but because they're doing something unfamiliar. And that was where I found myself, standing in the middle of my own home, watching the shape of my life shift one detail at a time, with no map to explain any of it. Somewhere in the middle of that month, I started noticing how often I didn't know exactly where Lisa was. Not in a controlling way, just in a way that felt new. Before, her schedule was open by default. She'd tell me when she planned to go out, where she'd be, when she thought she'd be back. Now, I found myself asking more often. "Where'd you head today?" I asked one evening as we sat down for dinner. "Oh, nowhere much," she replied, poking at her salad. "Worked from that place on Delancey for a bit. Then just walked around." I nodded. But something about the vagueness stuck. She used to name places, mention people she ran into, talk through small things. Lately, her days came back thinner, as if edited. She told me she'd been working out of a co-working space downtown. A friend had tipped her off to it, she said, a quiet little loft with strong Wi-Fi and a good espresso machine. It sounded perfect for her, really. I didn't think much of it at first. But one afternoon, on my way to a meeting nearby, I passed by that building. It was quiet. Lights off. No signs of activity. It didn't seem like a place full of freelancers and design types pushing deadlines. Of course, I told myself, she could have stepped out. A lunch break. A walk. Any number of things. Still, the picture didn't line up the way it used to. And that stayed with me. I also started waking up earlier than usual. Not by much, 10 minutes, maybe 15. Enough to register the silence in the room before my alarm kicked in. Lisa would still be beside me, eyes closed, breathing steady. But there was something alert in her stillness. I couldn't explain it. I wasn't even sure I should. Maybe she was just thinking. Or maybe she was awake and didn't want to speak. It didn't feel like distance, more like waiting. That Thursday evening, she mentioned a deadline. "The layout is a mess," she said, not looking up from her laptop. "They keep sending new copy at the last second. I might be up late." I told her I'd stay out of her way. And I did. But I stayed downstairs longer than usual, TV on low volume, the dog stretched across my legs. I wasn't watching anything. I was just present. Listening without trying to look like I was listening. Every so often I heard a chair shift upstairs, or faint movement. At one point I thought I heard her laugh, a small, stifled sound, then nothing for the rest of the hour. It wasn't proof of anything. It wasn't even enough to bring up. But the quiet had changed. We used to share the same silence. Now, hers lived in another room. And I couldn't tell if it was trying to protect me, or keep me out. That Monday started like any other. Lisa was up early, already dressed by the time I stepped out of the shower. She had her laptop in one hand, travel mug in the other, keys dangling from her fingers. "I might be gone most of the day," she said over her shoulder. "I've got a meeting and then maybe a coffee with the layout team." She kissed me quickly, barely brushing my cheek. "Don't wait on dinner." I watched her walk out, then went about my usual routine. Emails, numbers, review decks. Our department was deep in quarterly reports, which meant long meetings, tighter deadlines, and the kind of tension that made even seasoned managers grumble. My boss, Grant, had called for a one-on-one that afternoon, just a standard weekly check-in. His office was 2 floors up from mine. Normally, I'd email ahead, but we were both in the building, and I'd already printed out the summary reports. Around 3:15, I grabbed the folder and headed upstairs. I'd been in Grant's office dozens of times before. His assistant, Dana, was away that day, so I figured I'd knock and drop off the file myself. His door was closed, but I could hear voices. One was his, low and flat, and the other was familiar. I froze for a second, recognizing Lisa's laugh before I fully processed what I was hearing. It wasn't her normal laugh, not the kind she gave in public. It was softer, lower, and closer. I didn't knock. I didn't pause. I just opened the door. They didn't hear me right away. The room was warm, blinds drawn halfway, and Lisa was perched on the edge of Grant's desk, legs crossed, leaning toward him. He was standing, close, too close. One hand rested on the desk beside her, the other lightly touching her thigh. She said something, I didn't catch the words, and he chuckled. Then she saw me. Her face went pale. Completely drained of color in an instant. Grant turned at the same moment, his eyes widening just slightly, not surprised enough. He looked caught, yes, but not panicked. Like he'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it. No one said anything at first. Lisa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I just stood there. Folder still in hand, like some parody of professionalism. The paper felt weightless. My fingers numb. She moved first, sliding off the desk quickly, smoothing her skirt like that would change what I'd already seen. "This isn't," she began, but stopped. Because there was no version of it that wasn't exactly what it looked like. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I just looked at both of them for a few more seconds, then turned and walked out. Back down the stairs, through the hallway, into the elevator. I didn't know where I was going until I was already in the parking garage. The only thought in my head was simple, get home. I didn't need answers. I'd already seen everything I needed. The drive home barely registered. I don't remember the route I took. Just turns made automatically, stoplights blurred in motion, and a silence in the car that felt heavier than traffic ever could. The image kept looping, Lisa's legs crossed on Grant's desk, his hand resting just above her knee like it belonged there. No panic, no shame on their faces. Just that look people wear when they think the door's locked. By the time I stepped through our front door, something inside me had already shut off. No shaking. No pacing. I didn't throw things. I didn't collapse. I just walked upstairs to the bedroom and opened her side of the closet. It wasn't a decision. It was instinct. Her clothes came down off the hangers in handfuls. Folded? No. Stuffed. Pushed. Jammed into the largest suitcase I could find. Then another. Then her tote bags. I didn't separate things. I didn't pause to think what she might want to keep clean or preserved. It all went. Shoes. Makeup. Sketchbooks. The lotion she kept in the bathroom drawer. The cardigan she always wore when she worked late. Every trace of her was out of the room in less than 20 minutes. I dragged the bags to the living room window, popped the latches, and one by one, tossed them out onto the sidewalk below. Her coats landed in a heap over her rolling suitcase. A box of books slid and spilled open. A shoe bounced once and skidded into the gutter. I didn't care. Let the neighbors see. Let them all watch. She texted me once, just once, sometime between bag 2 and bag 4. Can we talk? Please. I didn't mean for it to be like this. I didn't answer. I didn't open the thread. Then I turned to Grant. I knew things about him. You don't work under someone for 3 years in a financial firm and not learn where the dust piles up. I knew he liked to play fast and loose with client write-offs. I knew the account in Jersey that didn't line up with quarterly filings. I'd seen him fudge consultant reports, use shell invoices, sign off on tax strategies he didn't report. And now? I had nothing to lose. That night, I compiled the receipts, digital copies, flagged emails, a timeline. I sent it to the firm's internal compliance address. I didn't include a note. Just attachments. They'd figure it out. The next morning, I woke early. Made coffee like I always did. Sat at the kitchen table and waited for the buzz to start. By noon, he was pulled from 2 major client accounts. By 2 p.m., his calendar was cleared. The rumors started the next day. Lisa showed up once to try the door. I didn't answer. She called my name through the hallway. I didn't move. The locks were changed the day after. She tried again. Knocked. Rang the bell. Sat on the steps. I watched through the peephole for a while, then went back to my desk. She had made her choice. I was just making sure she got to live with it. By the end of the week, Grant's name was no longer listed on our firm's directory. His office door remained closed, the glass panel covered from the inside with a legal notice taped to the center. Rumors spread fast, not about Lisa, not yet, but about misfiled accounts, financial irregularities, and a pending audit that came out of nowhere. He'd built his career on charm and shortcuts. And just like that, it started unraveling. I didn't say a word. I didn't act smug. I showed up to work, attended meetings, answered emails, and drank coffee like nothing had changed. If anyone looked at me longer than usual, I didn't acknowledge it. I wasn't there to talk. I was there to watch it all fall the way it deserved to. Lisa tried again the following Monday. She left a note in the mailbox. It wasn't handwritten. It was typed. Polite. Short. I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to explain. Please. Just one conversation. I read it twice, then tore it in half and dropped it in the bin. I didn't need an explanation. I had the image. I had the facts. She didn't trip into his office. She didn't get confused or caught in a misunderstanding. She made a choice. And now she could deal with everything that came after it, without my help. Her things stayed outside until the weather turned. I gave her a day's notice to come pick them up. She sent someone else, a friend I barely recognized, who looked at me like I was made of stone. I offered no help, no smile. Just opened the door, pointed to the last suitcase, and walked away. Mutual friends stopped asking questions. Some reached out, quietly, saying they'd heard pieces of the story. No one pushed. No one defended her. It was one of those rare situations where silence spoke louder than alliances. As for me, I got quiet, but I didn't fall apart. I slept better than I expected. Ate simpler. I cleaned the apartment top to bottom one Saturday morning and packed up everything she'd left behind, little things, not worth fighting over. Her sketch pads, old cards, dried flowers from a trip we took to Maine. I put them in a box and dropped it off at her old studio downtown. I didn't ring. I just left it there. Work started to feel different. Lighter. I wasn't avoiding anything. There were questions, of course, a few veiled comments from senior partners, even a direct meeting with HR. But I had my story straight, and more importantly, I had the documentation. What happened to Grant wasn't personal. It was procedural. I just connected the dots that someone else should have noticed years ago. I started going out more. Walks. Solo dinners. Evenings spent doing nothing but watching the city move beneath the windows. I didn't rush to fill the space she left. I let it echo. Because sometimes the absence says more than the presence ever could. She had made herself a shadow, something temporary, flickering, ungrounded. And I was finished chasing ghosts. The apartment was quieter now, but not in an empty way. It was a good quiet. The kind that comes when no one is pretending, when no one is holding their breath. I stopped noticing the echo of her keys no longer dropping in the bowl by the door. The sound was gone, but so was the weight that came with it. I took my time reordering the space. I didn't redecorate out of spite, I just put things back where I wanted them. A chair by the window instead of under the art she'd picked. Her prints came down, replaced by simpler ones I found during a lunch break in the West Village. I rearranged the shelves. I gave away the record player neither of us really used. She didn't come back. Not after the friend picked up her things. She didn't write again. Didn't ask for another conversation. Maybe she knew it wouldn't change anything. Or maybe she thought silence was her best apology. Either way, I didn't wait for closure. I'd already found it, not in some dramatic finish, but in the way everything just stopped needing her. People talk about betrayal like it's a fire, all heat and explosion. But the truth is, it's colder than that. It's a quiet thing. A door closing without warning. A voice that doesn't sound like you remember. A room that stays the same, but feels different every time you walk into it. What shocked me most wasn't that she had done it. It was that she had done it without hesitation. Without conflict. Like it was normal. What Grant lost was measurable. Reputation. Position. Income. What Lisa lost was harder to see. Not just the apartment, or the safety of a shared life, but something in how people looked at her now. Like they'd seen something they didn't want to know. I heard she tried working with another agency, but nothing stuck. Her name, once associated with reliability, now had a different undertone. One you don't put on a resume. I wasn't proud of what I did to Grant. But I didn't regret it. The man who shook my hand every week, who praised my discipline, who talked about integrity like it was a currency, he made his choices too. And I let the numbers speak for themselves. That was always my strength anyway. A few weeks after everything calmed, I took a weekend off and drove north. Just me, a small cabin, and the kind of silence you can actually rest inside. I didn't take a book. I didn't need music. I just watched the trees shift in the wind, listened to my own breath, and let the quiet settle. I didn't feel broken. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. And when I came home Sunday night, unlocked the door, and stepped inside, the air felt clean. The space felt mine. Not because I reclaimed it. But because I stopped giving pieces of myself to someone who never intended to keep them. That's what freedom looked like in the end. Not revenge. Not escape. Just peace. And peace was enough.